We are so honored today to have two great people of Klal Yisrael with us. And remarkably, they co-authored a book. And Rabbi Wein and Rabbi Goldstein, I would like to ask you this question. I know from personal experience that somebody who writes is very possessive of everything that they write. How is it possible for two great people who have written books before to co-author a book and be satisfied that somebody else's work is in your book?
To be 6,000 miles apart. Rabbi, this book is really, Rabbi Goldstein did most of the heavy lifting, and to a great extent, it was born out of his idea. We've had discussions over the years about our heritage, especially the Lithuanian heritage, which is so particular to South Africa. And I'm from one generation, he's from another generation. But basically, we had Lithuanian teachers, our rabbeim in the yeshivot. And in our discussions, it became clear to us that there's a certain value system. You know, Judaism is not just laws, it's a value system. And the value system governs halacha. It's not the other way around. And we wanted to perpetuate this value system that different generation, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, Rabbi Goldstein's generations, should realize the value system that we were raised upon, and that it has great relevance and great importance to the Jewish world today and tomorrow as well. So that was the idea that we had. We divided up topics. Each one of us wrote about the topic that we were assigned. We each read what the other person had written and made comments. And then we were successful in getting a publisher, and the book emerged. And the book, with all due modesty, I think is an important book, and it's the parts that Rabbi Goldstein wrote are very well written, and it's you know, it's, I cannot say it's light reading. You know, it's not to be sitting at the beach with a mint julep in your hand, but it's a book of study. It's a book that a person should pursue, and it tells us not what we are, but so to speak, what we can be and what we should be, and what we should aspire to. And even if we don't make it 100%, but if we move ourselves even 1%, so then the purpose of the book was accomplished.
If I may, I think Rabbi Wein's being far too modest, so I have to step in here. The idea of the book emerged from many conversations that we had. Rabbi Wein has traveled frequently to South Africa. We've been blessed as a community to share from his wisdom for many, many years. And I travel frequently to Israel, and we've stayed in close contact. And the more that we spoke, the more that we found there were so many important principles that we both believed in passionately, that we had received from our traditions, that we felt we needed to share with the world. And so, in a certain sense, it may have been that I proposed practically, you know, let's cooperate on a book project, but it was really a natural outgrowth of those conversations, because the more we spoke, the more we found, well, you know, for example, one thing that's dealt with in the book is the importance of being a mensch, of menschlichkeit, of good character. And we were talking about that and saying, well, is that a value which is emphasized enough in the Jewish world today? And as we were talking about it, we thought, you know, we need to put this down, we need to write it down, we need to find a way of conveying the importance of this value system and crystallizing what we received from our teachers. And as Rabbi Wein said, you know, through the wonders of modern communication, you can actually write a chapter in Johannesburg and Jerusalem, exchange it, you know, within a few seconds, and so that's one of the blessings of modern communication, that it actually facilitated a book like this to be published. So it's a book about ancient teachings, but it was the modern world that allowed for it to come into existence.
I hope that all of you will get this book. To me, the book is so beautiful because of the cover. Now, I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but ArtScroll, Mayor Zlotowitz once told me, anybody who says you don't judge a book by its cover never tried to sell one. So the cover is important. But what most people don't know is that this is only a partial picture. You have here Rav Mottel Katz, you have Rav Aaron Kotler, and Rav Ruderman. But you open up in the middle, right in the beginning, this is actually the real picture. I hope you can see it on screen. There are two young fellas standing next to these three Gedolei Olam. One is Rabbi Tanzer, and the other is Rabbi Goldstein. And they didn't make the cover, but they made it inside the book. So Rabbi Goldstein has had a profound influence on our chief rabbi. And I wanted to ask you, in which way did Rabbi Goldstein define and change your life?
Well, I know that we limited here to finish at 12:40, so by definition, I'm not going to be able to answer that question, but suffice to say, in every way possible, and not only on me, but on Musmachim, on his Talmidim and students that he taught here in South Africa, who today serve the community in so many different positions. And me personally, he gave me everything. He taught me Torah, and part of what I try to do in this book is in some small way to capture not just the halacha, the way to learn a Gemara Sugya and a Tosfos, but also the way to look at life. Because he gave over a particular worldview, and for me, one of the most precious things. There's so many precious things that he gave me, but one of the most precious things was a connection to a Masorah, to a tradition, because his greatest pride, the badge that he wore with the greatest pride, was the badge of being a Talmid, of being a student. And that's even on his matzeva, on his tombstone, is written the words that he was a Talmid Muvak from Rav Mordechai Gifter, which means a devoted disciple of one of the great Rabbonim of our times. And he wore that with the greatest sense of pride. And everything that he gave over to us was as a loyal student of that tradition. And for me, that has always been such a comfort for me and such a strong sense of confidence that I'm not here to give over philosophy of the world or even a philosophy of Torah, which is my own personal philosophy, because Torah is vast, it's deep. How does one begin to form the framework of the key values, and where does one put the emphasis? That's what this book is about. It's like saying, where do you put the focus and focus your attentions and emphasis, and the book is an attempt to write down the areas, the core values, the areas of key focus that one needs to put into life, and that comes from a Masorah. That comes from what Rav Gifter taught Rabbi Goldstein, and then his Rebbe before him, Rav Yitzchak Bloch, and going back the direct line all the way to the Vilna Gaon and the great Rabbonim of that generation. And so we have something so precious, which is this link to an approach to Judaism, because it's the Torah is vast, and you've got to know what is the framework of values. Where do we put our emphasis? Everyone agrees it's important to be a mensch, but is it the founding value of all of Yiddishkeit? That if you don't have it, then Torah, which is built on a lack of menschlichkeit, is worse than worthless. It's poisoned. It's something which is defective. But on the other hand, there's the other dimensions of it, to be a klal mensch, to be connected to the destiny. These are some of the values dealt with in the book, but the purpose is to try and crystallize a particular tradition which puts emphasis on certain key values, to say this is where we must put our focus, not chas v'shalom to the detriment of anything else, because we have to keep every iota of Shulchan Aruch and every part of what it means to be a Torah Jew, but where the values that we put our greatest emphasis.
This is what Rabbi Goldstein always stressed.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things is to see it in historical value. 98% of Lithuanian Jewry was destroyed in the Holocaust. Other sections of European Jewry, even though they were decimated, somehow did survive in terms of numbers and certainly in terms of influence. Lithuanian Jewry, there were about 250,000 Jews in Lithuania. Barely 2,000 survived the war. And Lithuanian Jewry was special. It was unique. There's a reason why all the yeshivas in the world today still call themselves Lithuanian yeshivas. And they had an ethos, they had a way of looking at life, they had a moderation, they had a normalcy. And that was, that was all destroyed. and only certain individuals survived. Now, those individuals built the Jewish people. Rabbi Kahanim in Israel, the Ponevezherov, the Chazon Ish, the Briskerov, Rav Kook, those were the Lithuanian Jews. In the United States, Rabbi Aaron Cutler, the Mir Yeshiva that escaped
Rav
from
Hutner.
Shanghai, Rav Hutner, they were the ones that, so you have maybe 50 people. And those 50 people, including the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva, Rebbe Meir Bloch, and Motel, those 50 people, the only thing that they had left, they had lost their families. I remember Rabbi Paperman told me that one day he walked by Reb Motel Katz's office, and Reb Motel was sitting there and weeping. And he said, what happened? He said, you know, I had 10 children, and today, for the first time, I couldn't remember all their names. See, he said, now they're dead. So people that were crushed, and they rebuilt the Jewish people in the United States, here in South Africa, in the land of Israel. They're not heroes. Nobody's going to make a museum for them. But they had a heritage. They gave us a legacy. And it's an intangible thing. It's not something that somehow you can define. But we felt, inadequate as our generation is, but we at least saw them. The Talmud says about the great Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, the Prince of Israel, that they once asked him, how come you're so great? How come you edited the Mishnah? Why did you? So he said, Pamachas Raisi es Rabbi Meir me'achorov. I once saw the back of Rabbi Meir. If I would have seen him head on, I would be greater, but at least I saw the back. My generation, we still saw the back. I saw my father, I saw my grandfather, I saw my teachers. It was all the last of the Lithuanians, but I saw their back. And I would like that my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren should have at least some of the heritage, and that's really what spawned the book. The book is about the 50 people who rebuilt the Jewish world with values, with a sense of destiny, with unwavering faith and commitment, and if I must say so, with humor. The Litvaks have a bad name in the world. You know, everybody thinks the Chassidim are full of joy, but the Litvaks had a great sense of humor, a wry humor, a humor of what life really is. And they imparted it to us. And I think that that itself is also a value that should be stressed and should be known, and that can somehow carry us in the future as well.
Rabbi Wein, I have listened, you know, you're a role model to me, really, in so many ways.
You're in a lot of trouble.
Even what?
You're in a lot of trouble.
But one of the things that I can't stop listening to your biographical series. First, I had them in cassettes and CDs. I'll never forget, you always spoke about Rab Mendel. Rab Mendel, your Rebbe in Chicago.
Right.
And one thing, I still remember on the highway where I was when you said, he hardly spoke English, but he taught you how to read a newspaper.
So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yisrael Mendel HaKohen Kaplan, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, a Talmud of the Mir, and who was in the war in Shanghai, and who limped into Chicago. And he came, the Chicago Yeshiva invented jobs because they didn't have anything, right? Nobody had anything. I remember my parents, I mean, I don't say it as a braggart, but my parents, we gave away our dining room set to refugee Rabbonim that came that had nothing, and we ate in the kitchen for 5-6 years, Shabbos, everything. And it was my father and mother didn't think they did a noble act. I'll say that from Ton. So Remendel comes into the classroom the first day. He doesn't speak a word of English. We're 15-year-old ball players. We want to know what the Chicago Cubs did. And he's talking, how is this ever going to work? And he was the greatest educator that I ever met. So he made a deal with us. He said, you teach me English, and I'll teach you how to read a newspaper. So every day we bought a Chicago Tribune, and we would teach him, 50 words a day. Like in 8 months, he could read the whole newspaper. If he didn't know a word, he'd ask you. But he would teach us how to read a newspaper. He would teach us what really happened, what's fake and what's real, what's important and what's tangential, what's funny and what's not funny, so that for the rest of my life I can never read a newspaper without Remendel. He's whispering in my ear. He said, "Oh, that's nonsense," right? He used to say the comics is the only thing that's real in the paper. And so you had that experience, and he was a very clever man, a very, very clever man. And we just basked in his glow. He would teach Chumash, the Parsha of the week, 11 o'clock Friday night in the yeshiva. But you had to be invited to the class. Couldn't just come. And at 11 o'clock, he'd lock the door. If you came at 11:01, you weren't there. Well, that was the most popular class ever in the yeshiva. And he taught us a great lesson, how to be a teacher, how to make something attractive. And he loved us. I mean, that was the main thing. The Lithuanian Rabbonim that I knew, they loved the Jewish people. The Ponevezh Rav used to walk into a room and he would say, Briderlach, Schwesterlach. And he meant it. You were his brother. You were his sister. He loved you. So it didn't make any difference that you were a socialist or you were this or you were that. He still loved you. He used to say openly, he said, we're all one big family. He said, every family has a crazy uncle. But he's my uncle. He's in the family. What can I do? And that was a value that we were taught. So therefore, especially Rabbi Goldstein can testify, he's in a greater public glare than I am. You're a rabbi, you're fair game, right? And people come over to me, they say, Rabbi Wein, I didn't like your sermon today. So I said to them, I didn't like it either, but I had to speak. So you have to be able to roll with the punches, right? And that they were able to do so. They had that quality, and that's a value system. If you have that, so then you have a lot. And it's one of the things we try to communicate in the book.
I think just on that point, one of the major values in the book is this concept of a klal mensch, someone who is connected to Klal Yisrael, to the whole Jewish people. And that's a value that comes across very strongly in the book that we both heard time and again. And that is the Torah belongs to the whole of Klal Yisrael. And that we can't divide the Jewish people into factions and separate and create divisions. We need to find a way of relating to everybody as one family. And there's a beautiful description in the book with Reb Chaim Oizer when interacting with secular Jews who came from America at the time to help with the refugee crisis that was taking place in Vilna, and the warmth and the openness. And I think that's something which is so special here in the South African Jewish community, that there's this openness and connection between Jews, irrespective of level of religious observance. We know what the Torah is, we know the mitzvahs that we all have to do, but we have to respect one another, and there has to be a warmth and a kindness, and it's the fact that there are deep, warm, and real relationships between Jews right across, firstly within the community, part of the community that keeps mitzvahs and halacha. Doesn't matter what kind of yaminka or not, or what particular grouping. I mean, that's what Sinai Indaba is about. It's about that unity, that sense of being part of one Jewish family, but then reaching beyond the immediate community who's keeping mitzvahs, but to every Jew, and for every Jew to feel included. And I think that has been one of the most important and strongest dimensions of the South African Jewish community, that we're an inclusive community. And by doing that, it brings everybody closer to Torah values, because there aren't these huge walls and gaping chasms of division between Jews, and that's so important going forward for the Jewish future.
You mentioned Reb Chaim Ezer. This is one of the few stories that Rabbi Krohn has not yet told you, or will tell you. I knew, it's a long story, but I knew a Jew from Israel who was the executive head of a foundation that somehow helped schools in the diaspora in order to bind them closer to Israel. And one of the schools that they helped was my yeshiva in Muncie. And he would come 2-3 times a year to visit the schools. And he was an old Litvak from Vilna, a complete left-wing socialist, Mapainik. But he was a good guy. And I remember once I drove him to New York. It's an hour-and-a-half drive, so we had a chance to talk. And I said to him, in innocence, I said, you know, you were in Vilna. Did you ever meet Rabbi Chaim Ezer Grodzinski? He said, you want to know Rabbi Chaim Ezer? I'll tell you the story of Rabbi Chaim Ezer Grodzinski. And he tells me the following story. He said, I'm the president of the Young Jewish Socialist League in the University of Vilna. And the day after Purim, Rabbi Chaim Ezer Grodzinski's Gabbai, his messenger, comes on campus looking for me. You know, and he's with the beard and the hat and the whole thing. And I'm, so what do you want from me? He says, the rabbi has to see you. He said, see, you got the wrong guy. You don't know. No, he has to see you. He sent me to get you. So he said, Rabbi Chaim Ezer wants to see me. So I went to see him. So he said, I walk into the room and he sits down. I sit down. He said, Rabbi Chaim Ezer comes in holding a tray, and on the tray are tea and cookies. And he tells me, he said, listen, I'm going to make the bracha. You just say amen. And he makes the bracha, he eats a cookie, they're drinking the tea. He says, listen to me. He says, Pesach is coming. I want the Young Socialist League to make a Seder. And I want everybody to have wine and matzah. So I'm giving you here $100 American, which could practically float the university then. And he said, and you'll buy wine, and you'll buy matzah, and you'll have a Seder, and I want you to shake hands with me that you'll do it. He says, because if I make the Seder for them, nobody will come. But if you, the Young Socialists, will make the Seder, you'll all come. He said, whatever you want to say, but everybody should have 4 cups of wine and eat matzah. And he gave me the $100. And I said, I couldn't do anything, so I shook his hand that I'm going to do it. As I'm walking out of the room, I see Reb Chaim Ezer opens this drawer and takes out a Polish postage stamp and rips it in half. So I said to him, Rebbe, what is that? He said, I thought originally I was going to write to you, but then I decided I would send my gabbai to bring you. But because I thought I would write to you, maybe I owe the Polish government the postage stamp. So I tore it in half that I shouldn't owe the Polish. Now the Polish government, you could hate, was anti-Semitic. They didn't give a care about the postage stamp. But that was Reb Chaim Ezer. So when he told me that story, I said, that's why God sent you to help Jewish schools, to do a positive thing, because Reb Chaim Ezer is pushing you in the back.
Beautiful. Rabbi Goldstein, you mentioned the word America. You know, I must admit, I cry at the Star Spangled Banner. I'm a very proud American. I love Eretz Yisrael, no question about it, but I am very proud, especially of the many, many wonderful Yidden that we have. And I know you just had a whirlwind trip across the country. You started in New York, you spoke there, you spoke in Los Angeles. What was your impression of American Jews?
That's a good question. Who's listening? I was there. Rabbi Wein and I spoke about the book together in New Jersey, and I spoke in a few other places to talk about the book, because at the end of the day, this is obviously a book which has a message, and we want to get that message as far and wide as possible. I was really amazed and inspired at the sheer scale of American Jewry. What has been rebuilt, and it comes back, to that photograph that's on the cover of the book, because if you think about it, on that cover is, if you pass me the book here, I'll show you here. You've got on the left here is Rav Motel Katz, the founding Rosh Hashiva of Telz in Cleveland. In the middle, Rav Aaron Kotler, from the founding Rosh Hashiva of Lakewood, New Jersey, and then Rav Yitzchak Ruderman, to his left, of the founder of Ner Yisrael, and in Baltimore. And so what you have here is a story of the heroism that Rabbi Wein was talking about before, because these were all people. Of course, Rav Motel Katz, he suffered the greatest, but the heroism of rebuilding Torah, and that's part of what the book goes into, this amazing story of the miracle of the rebuilding of Torah in America. And you see it today, these thriving Torah communities in America. And we know as well in Israel and here in South Africa that by all accounts, on a rational analysis of the set of circumstances, there shouldn't have been Torah. There's an amazing story which I heard from my Rosh Hashiva blessed memory, and then I saw it printed as well in the recent ArtScroll biography on Rav Gifter, where Rav Gifter was going with Rav Elimeir Bloch, the other founding Telz Rosh Hashiva in Cleveland, and they were in New York shopping for Sfarim, and they came into a bookstore in New York, a Judaica store, and they asked for a copy of the Ktsos HaChoshen, which as you know is one of the more elaborate analysis of Choshen Mishpat, of some of the most intricate dimensions of halacha, of Torah law. And they asked for a copy of the book, and the owner of the shop went cricking all the way up to the attic, and he looked and eventually brought down a dusty old copy, and he said, he gave them the book, and he said, look, this is a historic moment. You're buying one of the very last copies of the Ktsos HaChoshen in the United States of America, and this will never ever be reprinted. This is it. This is the end of it. And Rav Elimeir bought the book and went out. But the interesting thing is, when they walked out of the shop, Rav Elimeir said to Rav Mordechai Gifter, he said, you know what, that storekeeper's right. And Rav Gifter was taken aback. I mean, how can you say that the storekeeper's right, that this is the end of Torah? And he said, by laws of nature, al pi seichel, in terms of the normal laws of nature, then this should not be. The normal laws of nature, Torah should be finished. But Torah does not follow the normal laws of nature. Torah follows the destiny of Hashem. And that's part of what we wanted to write this book, because we're paying tribute to these heroes who revived Hashem's Torah. And of course, because it is Hashem's Torah, it's eternal. And it's an amazing story of heroism. And that's why, as you open up and you see the full picture inside, then you see from them came Talmidim who came to South Africa, rebuilt Torah in South Africa. And there is just a sequel similar to a story that I heard from my Rosh Hashiva that Rabbi Wein mentioned with Rav Motel Katz, when his students said to him, how do you recover? His wife and 10 children were murdered in the Holocaust, and they said, how do you get past that? And he answered in the Yiddish, he said, after such a churban, after such a destruction, the only answer is to learn Torah hard, to create Talmidim, and to spread Torah, to build Torah in the entire world. And that's what his Talmidim, that's what his students heard. And they went and built Torah right across America and right across the world. And it's the most amazing story of miracles. We live really in a time of miracles, but because by all of the normal laws of nature, nothing that we see should exist.
I want to mention with Rabbi Krohn, what about American Jewry? In 1964, Barry Goldwater ran for president of the United States. Barry Goldwater's grandfather was Jewish. His father already converted to Christianity in Arizona, and Goldwater was a practicing Christian. But Goldwater ruefully remarked that the first Jewish president of the United States would be an Episcopalian. But look what changed. Joseph Lieberman was the popularly elected vice president of the United States, a Torah-observant Jew who never campaigned on the Sabbath, who only ate kosher. And who would have imagined that, that such a thing could happen? And in the House of Representatives in the United States and the United States Senate, every week there is a class in Torah where the Jewish and even the non-Jewish legislators attend. There are rabbis from New York and Washington that give the classes regularly. Then, that's the miracle of American Jewry. The miracle of American Jewry is not the unfortunate assimilation, intermarriage, all of those problems. The miracle is that not only did Torah survive and thrive, but that it has become, in the eyes of most Americans, what Judaism is about. And it's not about being exactly like the non-Jewish world.
I got to tell you a great story, and then I'll ask Rabbi Wein a personal question. Rabbi Wein mentioned Joe Lieberman. I once had the opportunity to do a bris where Joe Lieberman, when he was running for vice president,
not on him.
What? Not on him. No. I did his grandson. No, the baby was on his lap. And I can just tell you, after the bris, somebody says, "You see that guy there?" I take a look. It's a Hasidic-looking guy. He's from the Secret Service. He's got a gun on me. He said, "He had a gun on you the whole time when you were doing the bris." I said, "You got to be kidding." They said, "Yeah, you had a knife 2 inches from the heart of the future vice president. We had to be careful." Imagine that. And he made me tell over that story in YU when I did his grandson. Rabbi Wein, I have to ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. I remember the first time I met you. If you remember, I stayed with you.
Miami Beach. Yeah.
Right, Miami Beach. And I was there for the second day's Yontif. We did a bris in the Benavista family.
Right.
And after Yontif, I said to Rabbi Wein, "It's incredible. You're the only man in Miami without a suntan, because you're always working. What drives you? You've done videos, lectures, books, CDs, everything. You don't stop. Don't you ever get tired?"
I'm always tired, but I have my story that drives me is my Rabbi Herzog story.
What?
Is that in 1946, the late great Chief Rabbi Herzog came to Chicago. And we went to the airport to greet him. I was a child. My father brought me. And then we went to the yeshiva, and he gave a Talmudic lecture for 45 minutes in Yiddish. I even remember the subject that he said. He made such an impression on me. I was way before Bar Mitzvah. And then when he finished, he stopped and he said in his beautiful English, and it was, he had a PhD from Cambridge, but he was the rabbi in Dublin, Ireland. So you had this Irish accent coming out of this magnificent beard, and it was a little incongruous, Paddy McGillicuddy, he's talking to you. And he said, "I want to talk to the young men." We were about 200 boys in the yeshiva then, from the age of 11 to 21. And he said, "I want you to know," he said, "I just came from the Pope of Rome. And I gave the Pope a list of 10,000 names of Jewish children that were sequestered in Catholic institutions in the Second World War. And I asked him to give me back the children. And the Pope told me that he could not do so because every one of them had been baptized, and they cannot give back a child that's been baptized in the Catholic faith to be raised in a different faith." And when he said that, he put his head down on the lectern and he wept. I mean, he wept the whole, everything in Jewish history poured out of him. I'd never seen a grown man weep that way. And then he raised himself, and he looked around the room like a lion, and he said, "I can't do anything for those 10,000 children. But what are you going to do to build the Jewish people? What are you going to do?" And when we all lined up to shake his hand and receive a blessing from him, He said to us, I remember I was 10 or 11 years old. He said to me, did you hear what I said? Remember what I said. So I've been a rabbi a long time. Very long time. Very, very long time. And, you know, there are days that you don't feel like being a rabbi. There are days that, you know, it just grates on you. And whenever I felt that way, I heard Rabbi Herzog in my ears. He haunts me. So I decided that whatever I can do, I can do. And if I can, you know, if I can do this, I'll try and do this. And I think to a great extent, all of us should be haunted. And that really is one of the ideas in the book. To be, you know, we're here for a purpose. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a talent. Everybody has ability. Everybody has, so let's do it. And it's very easy to be tired, and it's very easy to say, you know, it's enough, etc. I noticed that in the Talmud there is no mention of retirement. Never, I didn't see any of the Tanoim, Amoraim, they never retired. They never bought a condo in Florida and said, that's it, you know. And so as long as the Lord gives us breath and life and health and ability, so we'll do what we can.
I have one more question for Rabbi Goldstein and one for Rabbi Wein.
I think that we're our time is up. As we watching all the other speakers, we're keeping everyone on discipline. So I don't want to be the one.
1 minute question to each of you. 1 minute.
Okay.
1 minute.
There's no such thing as 1 minute.
Rabbi Goldstein, you are so beloved by everyone. It's incredible.
I'm glad I allowed this question.
What is... What has been your greatest challenge as Chief Rabbi?
Oh, we don't have time for that. I'll tell you what I think what we should do, because we are close to we over our time, and I think that what Rabbi Wein was talking about, that sense of achrayus, of responsibility, that Chief Rabbi Herzog inspired Rabbi Wein with, that's what we need to carry within our lives, and that's one of the core values that I heard my Rosh Hashiva of blessed memory mention time and time again. Achrayus, responsibility. We all have to take responsibility for the Jewish people. And that's why this book, we were struggling for a name for the book. What do you call a book like this? And that's why we came up with the name The Legacy. Because the legacy refers to the past, but it's also about the future. This is not a book about what once was. It's a book about the future, about what we need to commit ourselves, the kind of values that the whole Jewish people need, the South African Jewish community, Jewish communities around the world. That's really what The Legacy is about.
I want to only tell you that you will not be able to get out of the parking lot unless you show them a copy of the book.
One more question to Rabbi Wein.
Rabbi
Yes.
Krohn, I think we must end. Apparently,
Fine.
there are signed copies actually available for sale. I just want to say from the proceeds that I receive from it, I'm putting back into Sinai Indaba because I'm not promising Rabbi Wein's proceeds. I'm just talking about mine, and that they
Rabbi Wein wasn't aware there would be proceeds.
And there are signed copies. Some have both of our signatures, some don't. So then we're available to sign them.
We'll be around.
And we're around. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you.